Morse's Indian root pills. I was intrigued, so I picked it up. I know from previous videos that I've done that it was widely known that people highly regarded Indian remedies back then. All you had to do was add Indian to your medicine name and it would already carry more weight than one that didn't. Today we're going to learn this story on this episode of Antique Bottle Stories. So first let's look at this bottle. It's less than 3 inches tall. It's a cork top, blown, tooled top. One side says Morse's Indian Root Pills. One side says W.H. Comstock. The other side is really crude, but I think it says Dose 2704. Nothing on the bottom, and one blank side for a paper label. So W.H. Comstock is William Henry Comstock. He was born in 1830 in New York. He was married 3 times and he had maybe 6 kids. He was a successful business owner, selling goods for many years. I followed William Comstock around for a while and there's just tons of information about him and his family business, but all the while I'm asking myself, when is somebody going to mention this guy Morse? I went through newspapers hoping there would be some history somewhere, and I came across this one article from 1905 that claims, "Here's the history of Dr. Morse's Indian root pills." Dr. Morse, who was the son of well-to-do parents, was given the most thorough education. The elder Morse, having convinced himself that his son had mastered medicine, advised him to pursue a non-traditional route, visiting the North American Red Indian tribes, who were reputed to use herbs with such success for common illnesses. The son then spent 2 to 3 years making his home among the Indians, learning their language, and so on. Upon his return home, his dad was on his deathbed. He gave his dad some of the concoctions he had learned, and he astonished himself with the results. He had a bunch of vegetable ingredients that he brought back with him, so he decided to form them into pills. He treated his neighbors with remarkable results. The demand was so great that he found himself obliged to give up his practice altogether to manufacture these pills. It goes on to say that it is an established fact that all diseases spring from one source, impurity of the blood. Basically, you take these pills and you urinate out the impurities. It goes on for several more paragraphs telling how the pills work for pretty much anything that's wrong with you. But this article wasn't helpful because it didn't name Dr. Morse or his dad. So I went to my trusty Google books to see if there was something in there. Well, I did find some information here. This book was written in 2004 and it's called The History of the Comstock Patent Medicine Business. So it gives me a good amount of pages before telling me that I've used up all that I can see without buying it. It tells how the Comstocks got into business and where they were located and all that. It says that the Indian root pills were not originated with the Comstock family. It says that the originator of the pills was an Andrew B. Moore. Apparently in 1859 there was a document that says that Andrew Moore owned 50% of the business and the other 50% was split between 4 guys. 2 of these guys had the name Comstock, and one of those guys is William H. Comstock. I'm missing some of the details in here, I think, but it says that as of June 1858, it says Moore is, and then the word is illegible on this document, but it says Moore is something to his original right, and the defendants are manufacturing under Moore's original right. So I wonder how his right was taken from him. This continues to say that the Comstocks have disenabled Moore from using his own name. So I don't know what happened here. Obviously there's a split between the partners and Moore lost his rights. This says an undated form of contract between Moore and the other half, George Comstock, William Comstock, Judson, and White. The parties agree at Moore's option either to sell the rights and interest to him or buy the rights from him. But if they were to buy him out, they must covenant that he will forever refrain from the manufacture or sale of any medicine called Dr. Morse's root pills or Moore's Indian root pills or any similar name. It took me a second to try to understand what it's trying to say, but I think what they're saying is if they buy Andrew Moore out, then Andrew Moore is not allowed to sell under Moore's name or Morse's name. So as you might know by now, there was never a guy named Dr. Morse. And that nice little story that we just read earlier about the son learning from the Indians was entirely fabricated, and they put it in every box of pills. So there's a lot of research done on the Comstocks, and the story of the Indian pills basically continues with the Comstocks, who sell it for close to 100 years, into the 1950s. But I wanted to learn more about Moore. So Andrew B. Moore was born in 1819 in Connecticut. He married and had 6 kids. He was born in Connecticut, but his wife is from New York, and they lived in New York for a while, and 5 out of 6 of his kids are born in New York, but then they moved to New Jersey for the rest of his life. Okay, so let's back up a minute. So what year was he split from the business? Somewhere around 1858 or 1859 here. Now this newspaper article is from 1855. Now this raises questions for me. So this is 4 years before the split. We see A.B. Moore and Company. Okay, so that checks out. This is interesting. It says successor to C.C. Bristol. So they took over an already established business. Okay. They're selling things like chemicals, lead and zinc paints, oh that's nice, dyes, oils, putty brushes, varnishes, along with several drugs, including the Morse's Indian root pills. But why is it called Morse's Indian root pills? If Moore is the inventor of this product, why wouldn't it have his name on it? I was kind of under the impression that it was called Dr. Morse after the split for legal reasons. But it was called Morse before the split, apparently. If we go back 4 more years, we see the partnership between Andrew B. Moore and Henry Thornton and a C.C. Bristol we just saw. The firm was called Bristol, Moore & Thornton. It's at 225 Main Street, which brings me to this corner. Okay, so obviously this partnership doesn't last long, and by 1855, Moore has taken over the business, adds a few partners, and that's when the Comstocks become involved. A few years later, he splits with them, and then he loses the business apparently to them. Or he sold it to them. So, around 1858, 1859, Moore lost his rights. But I see in 1857, just a year earlier, that Andrew Moore is indicted for libel. Doesn't say who the plaintiff is here, but I can only assume it has to do with one of his business partners. In 1858, Moore defaulted on his mortgage payment and his house is being auctioned off to the highest bidder. By 1860 census, we see that him and his family had moved to New Jersey. Here's 1861 in New Jersey, and look, it says that he's a pill maker. Maybe it should have just listed it more generally, like as a druggist. 1862, he ends up in the Civil War. He's 42 now. He's a private in the 2nd Cavalry. This says he's got blue eyes, brown hair, and he's about 5'7". 1870, he's 51 now. He's no longer a druggist, but he's a bookkeeper. 51 years old, and he's still popping out babies. He's got a 9-month-old baby named Andrew. In the 1870 directory, it also shows him as a bookkeeper, but I found it interesting that someone marked in pen in this directory and puts arrows pointing to him. Isn't that interesting that somebody else is looking for him? Skip ahead 10 years, 1880, he's still bookkeeping. Skip 5 more years, it's 1885. This article says, Andrew B. Moore, a bookkeeper in the service of a furniture dealer named Hanley, was arrested yesterday on the charge of having assaulted a number of little schoolgirls. He's 65 years of age. The mother of one of the children was so excited over the treatment of her daughter that it was only with difficulty that the police saved him from violence at her hands. 4 complaints were made against him yesterday. That's just gross. He died in that same city in 1898. There's not much more than a brief mention in the paper that he died. Alright, enough about him. So let's look at a few of the newspapers for these pills. Well, the first time I see the Indian root pills was that one that we saw earlier in 1855. Here's one from 1858 where one of the partners, A.J. White and Company, are claiming to be sole proprietors. Apparently the ownership changed many times throughout these 100 years or so. I just cut and pasted this from Wikipedia. I thought this 1859 ad has a nice little illustration. 1899, it's taking up a whole page. 1907, we're still going strong, and it includes an illustration of the bottle. In 1923, we're still claiming that it cures tons of ailments. The latest ad that I find was actually in 1954, and this guy's testament to taking the pills for over 40 years now for various ailments, and he's currently using it to combat constipation, since they have a laxative effect. I'm not sure that I want my picture blasted in the paper like that, but look, I mean, that's the picture of a guy who's regular. Here's another container for the pills. I'm not sure when they started putting them in tins. And here's a cute little ad. I'm not sure why the cats, but it's cute. There's a Dr. Morse's website that you can buy herbal products, but it's actually a completely different guy altogether. And that's all I've got for today. I hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching.